Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tabletop RPGs are a great way to spend time with friends and craft a fantasy story that you'll all take part in, though sometimes we can get a player at our tables that just aren't as into it as everyone else, and can sometimes bring the game down with them, such as the tale of this next DnD Horror Story. If you would like to help this Doge out, I ask that you please roll a crit on that like button, comment and subscribe to help feed the algorithm dragon, and help the channel grow. With that said, let's hop right into the story. The events that led to that guy no longer being invited to the table. By Reddit user mturja. I just want to preface this post by saying that I am not posting these stories with the intent of degrading or ranting about that guy. I generally like avoiding negativity and wouldn't be posting this if I didn't think that something positive could result from it. I want this to be a potential lesson for people on what not to do during a game of D&D 5e, and perhaps be a consolation to people who are playing with people like this. Just know that by talking with the DM and other players, you guys might find that they don't like the antics of the problem player as well, and perhaps you can come to a solution that works best for everyone. Now, this will be a collection of a few different events involving that guy and his character. This all occurred over the course of a 2-year-long campaign that ran from levels 1 through 15, and the party generally stayed the same throughout the course of the campaign, from when the main problems started popping up until the end. I will use the term group to refer to the real players, and party to refer to the characters, if I need to refer to them together. The reference characters are as follows. Uthgar. That guy playing a dwarf that started as a cleric to Tyr and eventually became a modified Eldritch Knight fighter that used wisdom instead of intelligence and pulled from the druid spell list instead of the wizard spell list. Percy, me playing the human war magic wizard who was dating an NPC named Sam, an elven enchantment wizard. Grendlock, another player playing a gnome vengeance paladin of Tyr. He was with the party before Uthgar joined, and Uthgar's players seemed to make the character worship Tyr to try and create a connection with another character, which is generally a good way to build a character in my opinion. Scott, our DM. His name has been changed obviously, but if he reads this, he will know why I chose the name Scott. The rest of the party. There is one other player, eventually two, that don't need to be referred to by name for the story to make sense. They are great players, they just didn't have many altercations with Uthgar, and so don't need to be named. Abaddon and Valeria, if you read this, I love you guys. I'm going to try to keep events in the order that they occurred, but I will be starting with the events that happened in game and then talk about the actions out of game. This is long, so I appreciate those that chose to take the time and read it. If you don't have time or simply don't want to, I understand and hope you have a wonderful day nonetheless. For some background, we are playing in a homebrew campaign setting on the continent of Cynric. A couple millennia ago, White Dragonborn waged war on the continent against all the other races with the aid of 100-foot-tall giants and the White Master Dragon, which was the size of a mountain. The giants were generally thought to be unkillable without his very special sword that would give you a fighting chance. However, the Dragonborn army were eventually defeated when hobgoblins managed to create an earthquake so large that it demolished the mountain as the Dragonborn army was traveling through it, and with that the White Dragonborn had gone extinct. However, 10 months prior to the events of this campaign, they had been resurrected by a powerful wizard named Malthus, and they were set on trying to take over the continent again. With that background, the party had just been captured by the White Dragonborn and managed to escape from their clutches. They traveled west from the Dragonborn encampment and visited Percy's former teacher Merlin at his tower where he taught a handful of mages and managed to acquire a necromancy book that had corrupted a student. They traveled south to a city named Bronzehold that had been destroyed by Malthus, and found the dwarves that they had befriended earlier, who had their underground city taken over by devils. Were in Bronzehold and were working to rebuild, but they needed as much help as they could get to be able to defend the city. Percy suggested that they travel back north to get Merlin and his students to bring them here for their safety and so they could help defend the city. The party then trekked back to Merlin's tower, and that is where that guy made his first memorable transgression. We arrive at the tower as it's being attacked by devils. We managed to fight them off, but the students had been sent away to hide in a nearby cave, while Merlin fought off the devils. After we fought off the devils, and some character argument occurred over Grendlock taking the necromancy book from Percy's bag to protect him from its influences, which led to the death of Merlin. Uthgar ran to the students to tell them what happened. Percy followed behind, furious at Grendlock and unsure how Tyr, the god of justice, could support theft from a friend and ally. Before Percy could arrive to the cave, Sam spoke very poorly of Tyr to some students. In response, Uthgar struck her across the face right before Percy arrived. I was shocked and didn't think I would have to encounter this kind of physical abuse in a game setting. Killing enemies is one thing, but hitting a significant other of a party member is another. An argument broke out, and it caused Uthgar to sulk in the corner when the party all arrived, heard what happened, and took Percy's side. That was when Uthgar decided to take his shield, with the symbol of Tyr, off, throw it to the ground, and stomp on it, grinding it into the dirt. I want to say that this could have been a massive character moment if it had been built up to, but there was no previous event that made Uthgar question the god that he served, or even doubt his intentions. So, in one session, he had put himself in opposition with Percy and Grendlock. We traveled south with the students and the recently resurrected Merlin and arrived back at Bronzehold. When we got there, we had a meeting with the Dwarven Queen, Gianna, to request that the mages be allowed to stay, and informing her that they would help rebuild and protect the city. She agreed, and during this meeting, Uthgar was questioned by Makir, a Dwarven cleric of Odin who had taught Uthgar how to be a cleric. Makir asked why Uthgar wasn't wearing his shield of Tyr, and Uthgar denounced Tyr fully and said that he was a, quote, false god, to which Gianna told Uthgar that she was disappointed in his choices. She was a high-level paladin, and worship is a large part of the Dwarven identity in Cynric, so she was showing restraint by simply being disappointed. That is when Uthgar decided to call her, your hiney, and pull down his pants to show her his backside. That kind of crime got Uthgar arrested for treason, and he was eventually released. Scott admitted that he didn't want to just effectively kill the character or leave Uthgar to not be able to join us on any more adventures. These are minor things, but are things that I didn't think would ever show up in a game. But now we will get to the event that made the entire group and party furious at Uthgar. We adventured for a bit, and when we returned to Bronzehold, scouts returned informing us that the Dragonborn army was seen marching south, and they were bringing a giant with them. We had roughly 4 days in game to plan to defend the city and push back the invaders. Just to put into perspective how tough these giants were, we had fought one previously around level 7 and put around 200 damage into it, completely tapping our resources, before having to retreat because the thing hadn't even dropped below half health. I later found out that the thing had 1000 HP, which is why the magical sword was necessary to kill it. So suffice to say, these giants are not something to be trifled with. We are level 8 at this time and spend hours of session time designing defenses. We built catapults, used transmute rock to create moats of mud with single bridges that were easier to defend than a large open field, built up the walls of the city, and stationed mages and archers on top of them, all armed with fireballs and plenty of arrows, respectively. It is important to note that we only secured one side of the city that we expected the attack to come from, because the city was huge, and we didn't have nearly enough time to fortify the entire thing. On the night of the 3rd day, we go with a scouting party to gather some intel on the army coming towards us, and use some invisibility spells to help us hide in the light forest. When we found the army bedding down for the night, we searched the perimeter to get an idea of the army and felt that we had adequate defenses. But we decided to tie some strong ropes to the catapult's rocks to try and tie up the giant's legs, like in Star Wars. As we are getting ready to leave, Uthgar decides that he wants to walk into the middle of the camp while under the invisibility spell and cast Spike Growth right under the giant's head. Up until this point, whenever Uthgar had an idea that just wouldn't work well, we would try to give him alternatives because saying, quote, no, that's stupid, rarely changed his mind. But we were all dumbfounded at this idea and couldn't come up with an alternative that wasn't, no, don't do that, you'll get yourself killed. We couldn't kill the giant with 200 damage. I don't know what made him think that doing at most 8d4 damage would instantly kill the thing. So against the group's warnings, he did it anyway. The second that he cast the spell, he became visible as the invisibility spell describes, and he is immediately surrounded by the army and defeated rather unceremoniously. I wish they had killed Uthgar, I really do, because what happens next hurt us even more than if he had just had to make a new character. The Dragonborn get a commander of their mages, a sorcerer, to cast Detect Thoughts and interrogate him. They find out about all of our defenses, and more importantly, where they are located. Then they untie him and allow him to run back to the city. The army then picks up their marching pace and arrived early on day 4, cutting off about 12 hours of preparation that we thought we would have, along with attacking from a different location than they would have originally. The city was completely defenseless, besides the rudimentary wall, and we had to contend with a massive wave of white dragonborn soldiers and mages. We got thoroughly defeated and had to retreat or risk losing our own lives. Many innocent NPCs got killed in that assault. We lost a city we put a lot of time and effort into, and we had to abandon a strong foothold in Sinric as the city was relatively central in the continent. We also had to travel with what little supplies we could, while being chased by the Dragonborn. The group and party were livid with Uthgar's actions, and this marked the point that the group stopped listening to his plans, which I think further exasperated the out-of-character problems. I want to make it clear that Uthgar's and Grenlock's players are brothers, and the group were concerned about kicking him out for that reason. I personally can admit that I could have handled my response to him better. Whenever he started arguing with a PC and it started going towards PvP, then I would immediately cast Hold Person, which I think made the situation worse. He was the kind of person that would get really upset during PvP if he lost, and that would just make the entire situation at the table sour, so I just started nipping it in the bud. But I didn't talk with him about it out of character, which I wish I had done sooner. I'm not infallible, and I won't try to claim I am. Out of game wasn't much better either. From here out, the names are going to refer to the player, not the character. Uthgar was constantly on his phone with AirPods in his ears while we were playing the game. He would be watching something on TikTok, YouTube, or other social media, while the rest of us were there to enjoy playing the game with our friends. He also was frequently out of the room, whether that was to go outside to do something, normally just screwing around, or going into the next room over to lie on the couch. I got really good at knowing his character because I would have to play it when he left, or we would be without one of our tanks. He also had a habit of telling us to shut up when we were trying to have a character interaction or forcing himself into conversations that his character had no place being in. All of these culminated in myself getting very worn out at the game and ranting to Scott and later the other players. However, the story has a happy ending. With the ending of the campaign, which he missed both of the final boss fights for one reason or another, the group has decided not to invite him back. The out-of-character stuff got much worse towards the end, and that helped sway the group towards politely telling him that we are going different directions. Many times, people say that no D&D is better than bad D&D, but I am lucky enough that I got to keep playing with my friends who I have been playing with for almost 4 years, and I don't have to deal with these stories anymore. Fingers crossed, but the rest of the group are wonderful, and I have no worries about them. Again, moral of the story, talk with your DM and fellow players if you have a problem. You might be able to come to a good conclusion, and talk with the problem players. I certainly regret not sitting down and having a heart-to-heart with Uthgar, but by the time that I would have had it, things had already progressed too far. Thank you for reading my extended story. I am just sending it into the world as a final send-off to an otherwise wonderful campaign, and hoping that it can help other people who might find themselves in the same situation as I did. TLDR, character turned half the party against him in one session, went against the group's warnings and managed to make our previous hours of preparation worthless, along with doing basic that guy things, like being on his phone constantly, or telling players to shut up, or just outright leaving the table for extended periods of game time. He was eventually no longer invited to the game. Moral: talk with your DM and fellow players if you have a problem with a player. It definitely seemed like the DM made a pretty compelling story for the players to play through, but it sounds like Uthgar began to lose interest and began to throw caution to the wind, not caring how it would affect the story or the other players. And the fact that he would stop paying attention by looking at social media on his phone, and even going to the next room to chill on the couch while the other players were playing, solidifies that fact. This brings back the point that communication between everyone involved in a game of Dungeons & Dragons, or any other tabletop RPG for that matter, is always key in making sure everyone is having a good time. Not saying what Uthgar was doing was right by any stretch of the imagination, but perhaps something happened that made him lose interest that could have been rectified by talking about it. Thankfully, it sounds like OP's group is having fun again after removing Uthgar, and didn't sound like there were any hard feelings. Have you ever had an experience similar to this story? If so, I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you have a story that you would like shared on the channel, you can always go post it to the channel subreddit r/DnD Doge, or even at me on Twitter. As always, I would like to thank you for watching, I appreciate all of you, and hope all your rolls are natural 20s. Catch you next video.